Hey folks, Joe Valley here. Thanks for joining us for another Quiet Light podcast. Do not fast forward to the beginning because I have a special announcement. This is something that I've never done on the podcast, and I haven't scripted it, but I'm doing it now. I'm going to do it this one and perhaps on the next podcast that you hear as well. 2021 has been a banner year for Quiet Light, and honestly, all years before that were banner years. We've grown consistently year over year, but from 2020 to 2021 was quite the growth. And Mark and I are going to do a dedicated podcast, year-end podcast about that. So tune into that when you get a chance. But the special announcement here is that we are, I'm going to say it, we're hiring 2 new advisors in Q1 of 2022. Historically, we've never put the word out that we're hiring. We just let it come to us. We now have 15 advisors. All of them have built, bought, or sold their own online business, and that gets them uniquely qualified. If you don't have all 3 of those things, or there's an or in there, right? Built, bought, or sold. If you haven't done those things, then we can't hire you. You're not qualified. But if you've done those things and you've talked to guys on the team, girls on the team, men, women, whatever we're going to call them these days, adults, humans on the team that are helping other entrepreneurs achieve their dreams by having their own incredible exit and enjoying a lifestyle that's not too bad. We'll talk about that with Pat in just a minute. Reach out to me directly. Hit me up with an email, joe@quietlight.com. Share that you have built, bought, or sold your own online business, and share your LinkedIn profile and that you want to chat about possibly joining the team in 2022. Okay, now on to the show. Oh, you know what? Let me just say that if you don't give me those things, I'm not going to respond to your email. So give me the details that I just asked for. All right, on to Pat. Mr. Pat Yates, how are you today?
I am great. How you doing, Joe?
You just heard my first funny announcement that I've ever made like that before. So
that's exactly right. That's surprising. I didn't know that was coming up, man. That's exciting for somebody to be able to just email in and be able to say, "Hey, I'm going to be a part of it."
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah. It's we've always let it come to us, as you know, right? And we say no to 99% of the candidates, and that's why we have had slow growth over the years. But we're going to go from 15 to 17 in 2022. But I think we hired maybe 2 or 3. I can't even. Let's say you were in 2020, so we
can count. There might have been 5.
Paul Anderson, Ryan Condi, Ethan Alexander, and Elaine. 4. Yeah. Dang, folks.
Oh, and John, 5.
5, I guess. Technically 5 in 2021. Yeah. So there you go. But you joined October of 2020, and we didn't do a podcast with you.
Correct.
I want to say I do it with everyone, but obviously I don't. And I don't think I've done it with a couple of others as well. But this is about your journey after 12 months of being on the team, but also we'll touch on your journey before joining the team, because you come in uniquely qualified. You've got, a certain level of experience that nobody has at this point. That's that, every time I introduce somebody to you, I'm always like, he's a Shark Tank alumni. He's got to deal with Robert, tune into that one, yada, yada, yada. But why don't you give us a little bit of background on your entrepreneurial journey up to the point you joined Quiet Light?
That's great. I appreciate that, Joe. And I appreciate you having me here today, and everyone that's listening in to learn about Quiet Light. I think this will be a great introduction to that. I think that, my story, jumps around quite a bit. I actually was able to meet Mark probably about half a dozen years ago, back in early 2015. And we had discussed his business. And at the time, I was sort of just investigating whether or not I would, what I would need to do to be able to sell my company. I was just thinking about it. I was just kicking it around. I wasn't really that super interested in it, but we struck up just a fantastic relationship. And then we stayed in touch, and we had talked a little bit in 2019 or 2018. And then again in 2019, it just wasn't the right time for you all. And it may have probably not been the right time for me at that time too. And then I spent some time with Brad Whalen on the team and was able to meet with you, obviously, and spoke with some others. And then the timing just sort of made sense. I was ready after 20 years of running my e-com business that I still own, that I was ready for the next challenge. And the next challenge really wasn't going to be starting a company. It just became the opportunity to work with you all, which is one of the greatest things that, obviously, maybe the greatest thing I've ever been involved in. It's just such an incredible group. So it's been a fantastic ride for that year. But rewinding to my entire story, my first business that I owned was in 1990. I actually started an office and restaurant coffee company as a franchise with one other. There was a group here in Louisville, Kentucky, a regional coffee company that was selling their territories in Columbus into independent operated locations, a downtown area. If you could imagine a circle around a city, divided into 4 areas. There were 2 of us. One guy was my age. He had just graduated from Harvard, believe it or not, still owns a company up there called Crimson Cup. And we both started our own OCS companies where we just went in and cleaned coffee pots and pitched people on coffee service to their office. That's what I did all day. Wow. And we filled vending machines, and I did everything I could. I got up at 6 o'clock and I finished at 5 o'clock, and I drove my own truck and I made my own deliveries. And that was my first company. And
how old were you at that time?
I was 22. Wow. I was right out of college, 3 months. And my wife and I had just gotten married. This is a true story. I came home and said, honey, we're moving to Columbus. The truth is, she'd never even been there. She didn't even know what it was. But it was just an opportunity. It was a guy that I knew and I believed in. And he said, hey, if you want to move 4 hours up the road, you can buy this franchise. We'll help you get the equipment. And long story short, I built it up into a really solid business. Well, I had my first child in 1992, and then there was some issues between the owners on their ownership. So I executed my buyout, and that was the first company I sold 2 years after I was out of college. And I had a 220 mile non-compete. So I went 220 plus miles away, moved to Nashville, Tennessee, where I was actually from at one point. And my mom lived there, and I started the same kind of company there and then sold it 2 years ago. So I started 2 different service coffee companies there. During that time, I got into the kiosk business selling golf gifts, which is legitimately the worst location in the worst mall in Nashville, Tennessee. It was a joke. It was terrible. But then I found the better mall, did merchandising better, and started in kiosk. And then without getting too long-winded, which I do, that's where I started into the seasonal kiosk business, which led into internet, which led into me being involved with the International Conference of Shopping Centers and everything else that I've done retail and e-com since. And I've been doing that really since 1993, and owned Happy Feet Slippers, the e-com company, since 2001, 20 years at this point.
That's amazing. 20 years. As far as the kiosks go, what was the most that you owned, and how many do you have now?
Yeah, it's funny because that's a great study in idiocy, kind of. Honestly, my father and his wife, when they first started, I bought it from them because I helped them get into the business, and they sourced that one product. I bought the company from them. At the time, there were about 25 kiosks, and you had to buy either 4 or 8,000 pair. It was that regimented. You had about a 20-foot container or a 40-foot container because he was not going to stock and distribute. He didn't want a warehouse. He didn't want to deal with it. He was going to place order.
He was selling slippers as well. It was by Happy Feet?
Yeah. So He was selling, like, if you wanted to do it in North Carolina, you'd have had about 4,000 in a 20-foot container, which is roughly $100,000 worth of sales, but it's still a risk. And there was no flexibility in how you do it. So I bought it, and we started stocking and distributing, went from 35 to, I think the last year in 2012 that I was doing significant kiosks, we had 300 in all 50 states. And we've been in every state at some point, and multiple most of the time. And we had a location in Mall of America that was open for 3 years, all year round. So we did a lot of retail, but that obviously, where that business has gone, it's completely toxic now. So we eliminated it to concentrate on the .com. And that's kind of what built the funnel of my e-com, was that we put the name on the back of the slipper. We had 300 locations. People would buy them. Those people shut them down, and then they had nowhere else to buy. Right. So it wasn't my intention, but it was definitely a byproduct of doing those kiosks.
When did you start putting the name on the back of the slipper and start to grow the e-commerce side?
Day one. Yeah, I knew that if they had the name on the back of it, we actually transitioned and put it on the bottom some. And then we started really doing our .com at buyhappyfeet.com was legitimately a zero startup. It started at $0 in a basement. And, it does 7 figures just on the direct site, not including an Amazon presence as well, still to this day. So it's really good.
So I've known you for a little over a year now. We chatted a couple of times in previous years, but I didn't really get to know you. And you are the quintessential entrepreneur. You get an idea in your head and you just go for it. You don't necessarily think out all of the details and plan it out. You just know you can do it and you go for it. And you told me a story once about Cookie from the Jersey Shore.
Snooki, yeah.
Snooki, sorry. And who, as you say, is an incredibly sweet, kind, generous, nice person. But can you recap that story for the audience just so they understand a little bit more of what it takes to be a true entrepreneur, to break through and get things done the way that Pat Yates got done that day?
Yeah, what's really ironic, Joe, is I kind of talked about this when I stepped in and spoke for you, which you really don't know about, in Austin, $1 billion Seller Summit. I was speaking to some people about how anymore there's so many metrics. You can get the Helium 10s, which is a great company. I'm not typing anyone. There's so many things out there that'll get you as many metrics as you want, and everything's digits. You're running in your head trying to make decisions. I believe that back then, the best thing I had was my gut instinct. If I trusted myself when I made my decision, then it worked out. If I didn't and I hemmed and hawed, it was always a tragedy. So I guess to rewind to what you're talking about, I was at home. This was 2008 or 9. I'd have to go back and get the exact date. And my oldest son, who is now 29, was, 12? So he's like 16 or something. And he comes running in my bedroom in our house. And he said, Dad, Snooki's wearing your slippers on Jersey Shore. And I went, I only have 2 questions. Who's Snooki and what's Jersey Shore? And I've said this many times in speeches. I honestly had no idea. So I went and I looked, and there she was bending down, wiping something up. And she had on our pink and white slippers. And obviously I didn't know anything about the show, but the very next morning we had hundreds of emails, and we sold out every single pink and white pair we had. They're like that. Because people found it, we were the only people making that slipper. So
what year was this?
This was 2008, probably.
This is like the word influencer didn't even exist back then, but that's what she was. And you picked up on that. She had 820,000 Twitter followers. So I called my partner at that time, who I'm still close with. He still does our warehousing distribution. I said, listen, I'm going to talk to Snooki's agent and see if we can do a license with her. He went, you're out of your mind. No way you should do that. What if she does something crazy on TV, which she did? And I said, I don't really care. I said, I think that the value of the lead and the value of her is bigger. So I went and drove to Chicago 3 days later, met with her agent. We signed a deal for 6 figures within 3 days of her airing on that television show. We made 5 or 6 designs around her. We let her tweet out about them. Now she has 8 million Twitter followers. And the leopard that we made for her is our #1 selling item all time. It's not even close. Wow. And she's been to a show in Vegas with us. We've been out to dinner with her there. She sat with my wife one night. She didn't even drink. We were up in a casino and free bottle service everywhere. She's just such a nice girl. And she was huge for me, because then I realized that we could go out and do some things that we think are a little speculative, put our name out there. And I think one time when I talked with another gentleman who's involved in the business, I think we always just try to keep news around our business, something new that people would have to come in and be able to look at it. Some have been great, some have been failures, but I don't look at those as failures, because they framed everything I made decisions on from that point. At what point did you decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to try the next level of exposure and do this Shark Tank thing? You already had a business up and running. You didn't necessarily need Shark Tank, but you made that decision. You're laughing now. So give us that story a little bit.
It's kind of so weird, though, because as soon as Snooki came on, if people go to our press page at buyhappyfeet.com, and this is not a shameless plug for anything.
Yes, it is. Buyhappyfeet.com. They're the most comfortable slippers in the world. My wife and kids still wear them every day.
Yeah, they're awesome. And the cool thing is that she took us to like David Letterman show. I was at Jimmy Fallon when we taped Slipper Golf, which was unbelievably fun. We did so much press around Snooki. She was worth her weight 50 times what we paid her. And then Shark Tank took notice. We put in an application in season 3 and we got turned down. And I just dropped it because, first of all, people don't realize Shark Tank's like a 50-page written application. You can't type it. It's all written. It's all handwritten. It's all due diligence. If you can imagine going through diligence to sell a company, it's extremely similar, because they have to vet you and make sure that they're not going to find out that you're an axe murderer on TV or something of that sort. So we had to go through all that, and I just didn't want to do it. Well, I was actually playing in a golf tournament, and my phone rang, and they said, look, we've been looking at old applications for season 5. The show's blowing up. We're adding on 15 or 20 episodes. We'd love for you to reapply. So we reapplied. I went through the process for 3 or 4 months. We did 4 or 5 videos, came down to the first week of September in 2013. They said, here's the deal. We can't make decisions on the final ones. We'll fly you out. We'll let you pitch the producers in the seats. They like you, they'll keep you. If they don't, they'll fly you home. It's like, all right. So I flew out, and it was ironic because Snooki was actually on Dancing with the Stars at that time. So I went and pitched the producers, and that very night I went and watched her on Dancing with the Stars, which is a hilarious story to begin with, because I was huge and they had me in the opening and they made me move. So I didn't look like this huge like dinosaur in the middle of all these shorter people. Anyway, but so we taped it the next day with the people, and then obviously the rest is history, which is a crazy process because you're in there an hour. I think I was in there an hour and 15 minutes, and they cut it to 8.
Yeah.
So it wasn't going well for a long time, and I was afraid how it would look on TV. And the one thing people don't realize about Shark Tank, you can't see it till it airs. You're not allowed to watch it. So I had to watch it live as people watched it on television.
Yeah. So you had no idea what they're going to say. How would people Google your episode of Shark Tank right now?
Yeah, I think that ABC has it on there. I always stumble over which episode number it is. I think it's season 5, episode 23. But I think they have to find it on YouTube or they have to buy it like on Amazon. I know Amazon has all the episodes.
I watched it without, well, I do have a subscription to Amazon Prime, so maybe I watched it there, but I found it. I think they could do what you just said, season 5, episode 23. Or Happy Feet, Shark Tank, that kind of stuff. The cool thing about the episode, the whopping 8 minutes that you were on, was that Robert was completely out. He was done. He passed. He said, it's a no for me. And you reeled him back in unintentionally. How did that feel when he jumped back in?
Well, I mean, I think that people have to understand it was a building process over an hour and 15 minutes. It was only about 20 minutes in before Barbara didn't like me, which most women don't like me when they made me ask my wife. But she didn't like me and she went out, fairly quickly with, a long dissertation. And then Robert said he just doesn't think he can help it. And then Lori and Kevin got together on a licensing deal, which I was never going to do a royalty deal. And I was really upset Lori went with him, to be honest, because I had no interest in Kevin. And then I figured, since I had 2 people out and that deal's crap, I figured Mark wouldn't be interested. I kind of thought, since we had NBA, that he may not be able to. But I decided, instead of asking him his opinion, I wanted. You
had NBA licensing. You had NBA licensed slippers, yes?
We have Mavericks, and I didn't know if you could get him. Anyway, I wasn't 100% sure. In hindsight, I'm sure that probably wasn't it. But I decided instead, because I'd researched him, to give him a speech about how I would continue to grow this business. Because one of the biggest thing was, Barbara said that we had peaked in 2014, which was nowhere close to that. And I think what I had to tell Mark is that I was going to try to work as hard as I could to continue to grow a business. I mean, people look at me when I sell slippers, they feel like they have to hand me money on the street, like I can't make any money. I never understood how it was viewed. So I wanted to make sure he understood I was going to continue to build this very narrow business into something really big. And I think that impassioned plea, he ended up saying, "You are the real deal" in it. And I think that's what piqued, the interest in Robert. And I think what they realized in that situation is a lot like anything else. I'm a forward motion guy. I really am. I have lots of problems, but I put that part behind and I say, how does it get fixed? That's it. So I always try to forge forward. And I use that in Quiet Light every day, even though I make a ton of mistakes. It's something that I want to be able to go and make sure that I challenge myself to get better every single day. And I think that showed there. And then the whole atmosphere changed. And then the end of it was obviously really great. What
is it that you like about Quiet Light more than any other aspect of it, aside from working with me? Because I'm sure that's the highlight of your lifetime.
Actually, working with you is great. Believe it or not, folks out there, if you have to work with Joe, if you come in, he's going to motivate you. He's going to challenge you like nobody else. I was a coach in high school. I was a basketball coach. I was an athlete. You and I have talked about this.
Yeah.
I love to be challenged. And I think that anytime you look at a business, I just get excited about, like today, I did a buyer call with a new business that has nothing but recurring revenue, one item. And it was fascinating to listen to. And I got to listening to it and understanding how I could put my hands around it. And
that was a seller call, not a buyer call. They were getting evaluation from you? Okay.
Yeah. I did a buyer call after. I'm losing my mind on that one. Anyway, so this seller had one item, recurring revenue, doing $60,000 a month in our most recent month with one item, recurring revenue. Astounding. We don't see that much. Quite like you don't see that in many businesses. So I think for me, that the challenge of looking at a company, putting my hands around it and figuring how it can be marketable to someone else that's going to be a buyer is really a challenge, because I like diving into the details and understanding what they do well. Plus, it's like taking a master's degree in e-com every single day, because you get to see so many things and it's super exciting. And I think the biggest thing is that you get to really work with some people that become lifelong friends. Every single person I've sold a company from, I'm in touch with every 3 to 4 weeks, regardless. Yeah. So those relationships have been fantastic. I love that part of it too.
I love that part of it too. And it's so unique, I think, with what we do, which is building those relationships in many cases long before the transaction even begins, in terms of a signed engagement letter, and then long afterwards as well. I've been doing this for a decade now. You've been doing it for just over a year, and you've got those relationships. I often, say the best time to start thinking about selling your business is now. And I don't mean the day you start your business, really 12 months in anyway, because you're just trying to keep the wheels on the bus, keep the lights on for the first 12 months. And so really there's like a 12-month window to the kind of the youngest that we want to touch, which is 24 months. And, We only want to touch that because younger than that, folks, the buyers are going to seek a discount on the multiple. So 24 months seems to be that comfortable number. I've sold one as young as 16. Have you sold one younger, Pat, than 24 months yet?
One that was 18.
18 months. A little bit of a discount compared to regular multiples or something that would have been 24, 36?
Not much, but some.
Yeah.
Lower multiple.
Lower multiple. That's what I mean. Yeah. And you've only been around for, a little over 12 months now. So you've just begun to build your pipeline of relationships. It's been, let's call it 12 months, right? You started in October, but you were just getting your feet wet, didn't have your first one-on-one conversations for a few weeks. How many businesses in the calendar year, I know we got 2 weeks left and you've got some things under LOI, in the calendar year 2021, how many transactions do you think you'll end up closing?
I think there's a chance to get one in under the gun here late in the year, which would mean 13 businesses in 2021, which is way more than I expected when you and I first talked. But I was lucky enough to get some really good buyers and some really good sellers. I think that if I had to grade myself on how I've done from a production standpoint, it'd be really high. If I have to gauge myself on what I feel I've done to be able to gain that, it'd be much lower. It'd probably be a 6 or 7 because I hold myself at a really high regard. And I think that the thing that I've had challenging, some of the challenging things that I've had with relation to how you go through diligence and how you work with both parties slow down some of it. So could I have done more? Maybe, but it was still a really, really productive year, I felt.
Yeah, I think, 13 is a lot. It may not sound like much, folks, but, you're not just focused on those 13 transactions. Because if we were able to pull up the data real quickly, Pat, on how many conversations you've had in the last 12 months, it's not 13, it's probably 130, 1,300. I mean, how many calls do you have a week, helping people understand the value of their business?
Well, I think there was, as an example to some people, I think that when anyone understands that most times this can be a 60, 75, 90-day process. I mean, it's just kind of how it goes.
In terms of from engagement letter to the transaction
closing.
Yeah, 90
so
days.
If you have 12 companies, you got to envision all those going that period concurrently. And at one point I had 5 that were working together, closing at the same time, and it was a nightmare. So we had to move to less listings. But I think what Quiet Light does is unique, because I hear a lot of people say, well, why don't you just let someone else do the diligence process? Well, that's because we're entrepreneur centric. Because we want to make sure the entrepreneur starts and finishes in the way that we would want to do it if we were selling our own company. So I feel very comfortable that part is good. But I would tend to think that if you're having good lead times, you're probably going to do 10 or maybe 6 or 8 a week, maybe new calls. If I'm estimating, and if I have 3 or 4 under offer, like I have now, you might have 2 or 3 diligence calls as well. But then your new stuff, your buyer calls on the stuff you had listed could add up to it as well. So I think what's weird about this business is we've gone through some ebbs and flows of being super, super busy and then just being dead because you got things under LOI. So we just try to work as hard as we can. And truthfully, I'm so deep into working with the entrepreneurs. I'm not worried about how many listings I have. I worry about executing it as well as I can on the ones that I currently have.
Yeah. It's funny on the dead times for the first couple of years when you are real quiet in terms of activity, you've got listings that have closed, you've got 1 or 2, listings now, but, you don't have a whole lot in the pipeline. You're feeling like, there's going to be a giant gap and the world is ending in terms of what we do. But after the first couple of years, all those conversations, those 600 conversations that you had in year 1 and year 2, will keep coming back around because you've been genuinely focused on helping those people understand the value of what they have and reverse engineering a path to their own incredible exit. And you do it from your own experience and from all the tools and resources that we have at Quiet Light. So it's never just sell. We're not salespeople. Do you consider yourself a salesperson or an advisor?
No, I said it this morning when I was talking to someone. I said, I guess the way that we talk about it, if someone's out there thinking about listing their business, we're in no hurry. And believe it or not, the leadership at Quiet Light, including you, Joe, always says, I'd rather someone wait if they think they can improve the business over a 3 to 6 month period. Some people don't take that mentality. They'll either, mine for a commission or try to get someone listed. That's not what Quiet Light does. Yeah. So like in a normal time, I have I don't know, 8 or 9 businesses there that are on deck and LOI are live right now, but I have 100 in my pipeline. So people start thinking about the maintenance of continuing communication with those 100 that you could have in the next year or two is something that is hard work along with the 9 that you have listed. But I think the thing that I've learned is balancing my time between all those and being prepared and scheduling out as well is not something I did a lot when I was in my e-com business. So for the first few months, I really had to pick that skill back up. It sounds odd, but I sort of worked in ebbs and flows of what needed in e-com, and this I have to be really structured, and that's been a little bit of a pivot.
Yeah, if we think about,
but harder.
You've been at it for a year. Walker's been at it 5. Jason's been at it 10, and I might be stretching Walker a little bit. I don't think he's been at it for a full 5, but you've been scrambling, working like crazy, lots of time, lots of hours, right? That happens in the first year. Walker, he blocks all of his mornings for calls, time with his kids, for projects, things of that nature. And he works on phone calls and diligence calls and buyer seller calls in the afternoon. Jason, who this calendar year, believe it or not, I mean, Jason's been pretty quiet. I know you're on small team calls with him, but Jason's making more money this year than he's ever made as an advisor with Quiet Light. And by the way, Jason never needs to make another nickel in his life, but he's helping. And he is paid more on an hourly basis than any human that I know, because he's so efficient. He's so efficient and effective with his time, and is able to help people because of that experience and work with them in a way that is just gives them such a return on investment, and it benefits obviously him as well. So we're helping first. And it's a strange thing. You've got some gray in your chin. I've got some gray in my chin. When we were younger, it might've been hustle, work hard, see how much money we can make some more. Right. Now it's how many people can I help? The more people that I help, the more that comes back around to that thing that we wanted when we were younger, which is earning a healthier income that lasts for a longer period of time. Wouldn't you agree?
I would 100% agree with that. And I think people these days, especially in the climate and the way the world is right now, everybody wants instant gratification. Some people, especially in the sales business, can't have the patience they need because of goals or things that they've set for themselves. I think at Quiet Light, what's beautiful about what we do is we have to analyze the business from a standpoint of when is it ready to go. And sometimes we have to actually hold the entrepreneurs back. That's really counterproductive to some salesy type of way because we're not out there looking to do it. I've turned more people away for 3 to 4 months than I have that have come in and listed right away. So I think we do a good job of educating people on when the right time. As far as Walker and Jason, I think people, what they have no idea about is how astoundingly smart our team really is. And I don't necessarily even include myself, because if I had to list them, I'd be down here as far as smart.
I feel the same way. Put myself at the bottom of that list.
Because I'm a sponge. We got into one day on one meeting and I listened to them talk about crypto and different investments. And Jason was talking circles around every single person in that place. It's astounding the amount of resources that people have if they work with someone at Quiet Light. And I think that's what's amazing is some of the things I learned from my first 2 or 3 deals, I applied in numbers 6, 7, and 8. Mm-hmm. And some of those people that bought applied things that I saw work after the transaction. So what Quiet Light is really lucky to be able to do every day is make people's dreams on each side come true, which you talked to me about. We make an entrepreneur get life-changing exit money, as well as someone that buys it and has a brand new outlook on something that could be great. And those people still come back and eventually sell again. It's very hard to find holes in what's great about what we do.
What do you think is going to happen in 2022 in the e-commerce world? Do you think it's going to slow down? You think it's going to double the size again?
I think it has nowhere to go but up. I think the more that people get conditioned to being home, unfortunately, everybody's on each side of this COVID thing, so I'm not really going to get into whether people do, but the more people are at home, the more I think they're predetermined to trying to work, from home and not go out as much. I was recently just in a mall on a Saturday night this past week, and I was astounded. I thought that it would be much better traffic this year, that things would be back to normal a little bit. I think e-com is going to continue to grow. Do I think it'll grow at the rate that it has in the past? Maybe, maybe not. I think now there's a little pushback on Amazon. I think some people may slow down their Amazon presences a little bit, which I think is a mistake. But I do believe that it's going to be a strong market. Will there be as many big businesses like we saw this year that go to market? Maybe not, because you've got a lot of activity this year. But I do think for people that have been patient, there's going to be a real need for deal flow as we get into the first couple of quarters of 2022. And it'll be interesting to see how those multiples work against the previous COVID bumps everyone was talking about. could they maintain this holiday, and where will those numbers sit in the first quarter in Q1 and Q2? That would be exciting to see.
Going to be interesting in terms of maintaining the numbers if their inventory stuck on a ship off the coast of California, like some of yours is. As far as economy, inflation, supply chain issues, if the economy tanks, what's your outlook? What do you think is going to happen to the online M&A world? Do you think that available listings for buyers will dry up? Or do you think that people will be emotionally tired and worn out and just say, I got to get out. Let me list the business for sale? Or something else? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, let's look at it two ways. Number one, inflation. The last thing we really want are interest rates to rise, because that's going to affect money and capital markets and things, that people being able to access money is the first thing. But I think the biggest thing is going to be the capital gains thing of whether or not people decide to list. If capital gains goes up so significantly, and then you add your state into it in some areas, and I've seen numbers as high as 45 or 46 in some areas projected if the secondary package goes through. I think that's going to be the big widget of whether people, tax wise, it's going to be beneficial to sell, or whether they hold on to it for a couple of years. I mean, you've got the midterms coming, so that's going to be looming. I think that, again, I'm not talking politics. I just think it's going to be hard to get the votes to do the second one, but we'll have to see what that is. I mean, honestly, if I talk to 5 people, I hear 5 different answers. I'd be curious to know what yours is as well, but I think it'll still be good. I think it'll probably be a little bit slower than 2021, in my opinion.
All right. So my prediction is it's going to continue to climb, continue to get crazy. If inflation causes a downturn in the market and downturn in the economy and a recession, I think people are going to find, online business owners are going to find that they're strapped, they're tight, and that's causing them stress and anxiety. And they're going to just get emotionally tired and worn out and not have it in them, some of them, to live and fight through this, right? Yeah. And say, what are my options? Pare back, cut costs, things of that nature, and ride it out that way, or fight through it and try to grow more, or consider an exit. And I think the last part of it is going to be, there's going to be a good chunk of people. And again, like you just said, you talked to 5 different people, there's going to be 5 different opinions. Mine is that in a downturn in the economy, we may see more people coming to market than even in 2021, which to me would just be kind of crazy. For those folks who haven't heard me say it before, year to date, we'd have an average of about 4.5 offers on every single listing that we've had. And what are the stats on the deal flow chart? 62% have gone at or over asking price. And the median transaction size is going to settle in at about $2 million, which is up about $500,000 from the previous year. So it's all up in 2021. There's going to be a lot of things shaking around in 2022. I don't know what the real outcome will be, Pat, but I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that. I appreciate you sharing your past entrepreneurial experience and what it's been like for you here at Quiet Light. I'm excited to, see what you do over the next decade. And in other words, you can't leave. You're here for a decade, please.
That's all right. I don't really have anywhere to go. But just the people out there listening, whether you're selling your business, looking this, or your other M&A people, we're all extremely lucky. I think Quiet Light is the quality of people is what you're going to find out. I mean, it's truly relationship based. We all really care about it because we understand how much value there is in building a company. I mean, having done this multiple times, I understand everything that the person's going through mentally. It's not easy, and it's not meant to be. Anything like this isn't meant to be easy. So we're here to help you navigate. We're very, very fortunate to have a great team started by you and Mark, clearly.
And we're going to have another podcast coming up where, as you know, Pat, he said it himself, and I've said it before, and his wife tells him as well, he's got the gift of gab. So Pat's going to host the next podcast with me next week, when we're going to be interviewing Elaine Eason, who joined the team this year. Elaine built a aerial yoga business. Yeah, look that up, figure out what it is, on a Shopify site. Didn't ever sell on FBA. So she built a business from the ground up, an e-commerce store, and ended up selling it for 7 figures. Jason was the advisor. He was mine back in the day, and he's still around. And Elaine's going to join us next, because she then took some time off. I think it was probably 3 or 4 months. We'll get into that a little bit with her, Pat, but then she joined the team in I think it was August of 2021, and I'm excited to see what's gonna happen for her over the next 12 months. So
yeah, I was fortunate enough to be able to talk to Elaine when she was first coming in. I was one of the people she sort of pseudo interviewed with. She is a super smart lady. It's just an exciting person to have involved.
We'll learn more about that in next week's episode. So tune in, folks. Pat and I will be interviewing Elaine Eason. Pat, thank you again for joining the team, sharing your wisdom and experience, and looking forward to the next decade with you.
Appreciate that, Joe. Appreciate you having me.